Bone Crushers showed it in the memorable 1986 Cox Plate. Though Rogue displayed it time and time again by running great horses ragged. Octagonal had enough of it to keep finding the post an inch ahead of the opposition. And Saintly, Mahogany, Skillarchi, Let's Alone, and Viandacross, well, they also have it. The combination of talent, personality, and a sheer will to win made some of these horses out-and-out champions, others the next best thing. All of them turf heroes. A show like none we'd ever seen before toured Australia's racetracks in the late 1980s and early 90s. The main attraction was a horse that went faster for longer than anything the turf had seen for years, perhaps ever. And the ringmaster was a wizard at dragging the punters through the gates. For 4 years, the Vic and Vo show captivated racegoers around the country with their deeds in 4 states. But it was more than just a show. For all the hype, Vic Rail and Vo Rogue were the real thing. They would have become 2 of the great heroes of the Australian turf, and together they would be remembered as one of its great legends. When they weren't being feted as the greatest show on turf, it was obvious Vic Rail was a remarkable and unique trainer of thoroughbreds, and Vo Rogue, simply one of Australia's greatest ever racehorses. But it didn't start out that way.
I think it was Saturday night that he arrived, and then on the Sunday morning, I went around there and I said, "What's that thing in the sand roll there, Victor?" And Vic said, "That's got to be your horse," he said, "because that's the only one that's coming up that I know of." And I looked at this thing and it looked like a big Great Dane, and these 2 big eyes just looked up at me and said, "What are you going to do with me?" We were going to put him through the Magic Millions sales, or we thought we were, until we saw him in the sand roll. And I said to Vic, "Oh, gee, we should send this horse back to its owner." He said, "Well, if we send him back to the owner," he said, "he'll die on the float trip back." He said, "We'll have to feed him for a while." So we fed him for 6 weeks before he could worm him. And one day I was taking him out of his stall. He was unbroken and that, and he sort of walked out of the sand roll. He knew he'd just run away on me, and I grabbed him by the tail. And he just sort of pulled me straight out of the sand roll, and I said, "Gee, this horse has got a few brains." And I think I just fell in love with him from there.
Vo Rogue may not have looked a world beater in that Southport win of January '87, but by the time he won at Doomben 2 starts later, a quality 3-year-old was emerging. The win was enough to convince Vic to take on the big time in Melbourne and team up again with Cyril Small.
I did a 3-month suspension and got married at the same time, so I was away on honeymoon. The week later, after the honeymoon, I went to Melbourne. I had to race fairly hard to ride him, but he won by 8 lengths on Australia Cup Day.
Balance for the run home. Vo Rogue with a big lead. He's more than 4 lengths in front over War Correspondent under the whip. A good gap to Mr. Impertinent, Chrysidium and Sly Habit out wider. Vo Rogue has still got 5 lengths on the opposition as they race down to the 100. He's been in front from the very jump, and the Queenslanders run them ragged. It's Vo Rogue from War Correspondent, Sly Habit and Chrysidium, and Vo Rogue reached the judge by about 8 lengths. Go for Sly Habit.
It was his effort in the Creswick Stakes that pointed to the horse's real potential. His 8th start in 9 weeks produced one of the wins of the Melbourne Autumn Carnival of 1987. He defied all challenges up the Flemington Straight, and when they checked the time, found he'd run the 2,000 metres in a blistering 2 minutes and 7/10 of a second. Then came this.
Vo Rogue turns around the bend 2 lengths in front over Ravenel and Cossack Warrior the outside. El Vaquero trying to get up on the fence from Myocard. Vo Rogue has been in front from the start. Hard Ridden is holding Cossack Warrior, Ravenel at bay, and Vo Rogue from barrier to box. Vo Rogue first, second Cossack Warrior, either
and
Ravenel
a star
or
was born. The freewheeling Queenslander ran the 2,040 metres in race record time. Vo Rogue failed dismally in 2 subsequent Sydney starts, but he was at the end of a strenuous second preparation. After 11 starts in 3 months in 3 states, the young star was looking for a rest. He came back a better, stronger galloper in the spring. After wins at Doomben and Ipswich, and placings in the Fee Stakes and the Royal Show Handicap, the 4-year-old was back at Flemington. The result? He carved out the 2,000 metres of the Turnbull Stakes in a brilliant 2 minutes, 1.3 seconds. But it wasn't until his next campaign, the autumn of 1988, that the champion arrived.
Bow Rogue trying to steal the Noritake William Reid Stakes, 3 lengths in front of Groucho near the turn. Clark calling on Military Plume for his run, a half length away, then Northern Copy. Campaign King going up on the fence, King Phoenix the outside, and Raveneau. Bow Rogue a length and a quarter in front. Groucho called for his effort in second placing, then Military Plume 2 lengths, Campaign King, King Phoenix. They're into the straight, and Bow Rogue challenged by Military Plume from Groucho, and then Campaign King. It's Bow Rogue in front. He's fighting on too well. Bow Rogue all the way. The Queensland champion. Bow Rogue won from Military.
That was the start of something special.
He's gone for the whip on Bow Rogue, but they're not making any ground on him. 200 to go. Bow Rogue's got it. One, he's walked in. Vic Rail's got this horse fit. Bow Rogue's now 6 in front of King Phoenix, running up the second with Groucho and then Military Plume. Bow Rogue's won by 5 lengths to King Phoenix. Still 6 in front. He rides him along now. He's got it 1. What an exciting horse this is. Bow Rogue's 6 lengths in front of Bonomi, King Phoenix and Cossack Warrior. Bow Rogue has won by 7 lengths. Bonomi second.
5-1 on in the St George Stakes. And Bow Rogue didn't give the punters who took the prohibitive odds a moment's worry. He had trained on perfectly from the Blamey Stakes, where he ran the mile in a sizzling 1 minute 34 flat to post another record.
You can't beat him no matter what you do. Bow Rogue comes away, wins by 2.5 lengths. Cossack Warrior, 3 lengths on the line.
He had to work harder to dispatch Campaign King in the Futurity. But he was stepping back to 1,400 metres. And after all, it was Campaign King.
He's gone for the whip on Bow Rogue. Campaign King's got to his girth. Bow Rogue jumped in front. Campaign King trying. The bow in front. He's done it again.
The win set up the match race of the century as they built it. Bow Rogue versus the Great Bone Crusher, with Vaux starting even money to take the prize. He won the match, but not the race. Dandy Andy, a bolter, arrived late to spoil the punter's day.
Bow Rogue stopping, and Dandy Andy's coming hard. Thompson, this is going to be a boil over. Dandy Andy's going to beat Bow Rogue. Dandy Andy, Brent Thompson beat Bow Rogue. Bone Crushers run third.
Well, that was, on his part, I think one of his very courageous races, to run second in that race. He'd raced the week before in a 7-furlong race and beat Campaign King, and he came out on a slightly rain-affected track, which he despised a lot, and he wasn't quite the same horse on that day, and he still ran a very gallant second. He crushed Bone Crusher, but Dandy Andy happened to be along there on the day, and he put in one of his best runs ever, Dandy Andy. I think prior to that, the closest he ever got behind us was 10 lengths.
That started a run of 6 outs for the champion, and he had to return to Flemington to break the drought.
Bow Rogue nicely in front at the 200. Small is going for dear life on him. He leads by 2.5 lengths over Eberly Show. Apollo Run finishing well from Kenzai. Bow Rogue in front. He's hanging on. He's going to win his second successive Turnbull. Bow Rogue beats the judge. Bow Rogue by...
He followed this with one of his greatest victories. Lumping 61 kilos after being switched back in distance 600 metres, the champ was forced to come from behind in a field of 16 at Caulfield to collect the prize. That race should have made him a short-priced favourite for the 88 Cox Plate. But controversy would deny the mighty galloper his best chance of winning Australia's best race. Arguments erupted over the champ's absence, but the one fact remains that our poetic prince won the Weight for Age Championship on a track rated good, while Bow Rogue was back in his stall. Wins at Eagle Farm and in the Winfield Classic at Ascot in Perth confirmed the Iron Horse's constitution before another Melbourne autumn campaign. If he was already a champion, then the autumn of '89 proved Bow Rogue a super horse. And super is the operative word.
In front here, Superimpose finishing well. Bow Rogue still nicely clear from Superimpose, taking a little bit of ground off him. But hands and heels, the Queensland champ, too good. Bow Rogue wins at a length and a quarter.
Consider this. Superimpose went on to become one of the great horses in Australian racing history. yet he couldn't get near Vogue.
300, Small sitting quietly on him. He leads about 5 lengths to Superimpose. In third placing, Ideal Sediment, followed by Dandy Andy. Shakes up Vogue with 100 metres to go. It's a walk, trot and canter for Vogue. Here's win number 21. The Vogue show keeps rolling along. Vogue scores easily from Superimpose.
And it's Small waving the whip at Vogue. He leads by about 3 lengths here. Our Poetic Prince going up on the outside of Dandy Andy and Superimpose well clear of the rest. 200 metres from home, and Vogue is going great guns. He's more than 2.5 lengths in front over Superimpose, and then Our Poetic Prince, and Vogue is going to lead all the way again. A great performance in the Australian Cup.
In fact, Superimpose only came into his own after Vogue's career was on the decline, and trainer Lee Friedman admitted to eventually working his horse's program around avoiding the mighty Queenslander. For Vic Rail, owners Jeff Perry and Gary Roberts, who had acquired a 5th share in the champion, and jockey Cyril Small, it was the high point in one of racing's greatest fairy tales.
He helped me along the way, like helped us build a nice home, and I suppose made my name well known throughout the racing industry. Whenever anyone mentions Vogue, they sort of remember who rode him, more so than a lot of other horses, which have a lot of different riders on. But I was very fortunate to have exceptionally good owner that stuck by me through thick and thin.
He made me a millionaire, yes. Like any other way, it's hard to say. But like, yeah, he made me a millionaire.
While Vogue probably never reached those heights again, the great galloper had a couple of historic wins left in him. He would win his one and only Sydney race at his next campaign. And what a race to win.
Vogue is the leader. Vogue by a length on Marimbula Bay, the first to go after him. Here comes Groucho. Stylish Century is still there. Don't Play, not getting much room. And From the Planet down the extreme outside, but Vogue won't give up. He's still in front. Groucho's grabbing him now. Groucho coming at Vogue. Don't Play, getting a rails run. Vogue in front. He's got a heart as big as himself. He'll win. Vogue has cracked it at last in Sydney.
Look at that. The Rogue wasn't able to set up a break over the Randwick Mile and looked beaten several times up the straight, but he just kept giving. He refused to be beaten. The wins were running out for Vogue against a new brigade of top horses, and his 6-year-old legs weren't carrying him as fast as they used to after more than 50 race starts. Or were they?
Vogue with a big lead inside the 400. He's 4 lengths in front of Stylish Century, who can't peg back the leader. Better Loosen Up is starting to finish quickly on the outside. Vogue in front by 3 at the 200. Better Loosen Up, the danger. Superimpose coming quickly. Vogue about 2 lengths in front of Better Loosen Up. Superimpose. Vogue with 100 to go by a length. He's holding them at bay. The Rogue will win his second in a row. Vogue wins at a length. Better Loosen Up. Superimpose is third, 3/4 of a length away. Then
it would be Vogue's last win. He would have another 16 starts, but despite a courageous second to Better Loosen Up in the 1991 Australian Cup, the 7-year-old was clearly past his best. He retired the winner of 26 races and over $3 million in stake money. Tragically, Vic Rail died just over 3 years later, an unlikely victim of the equine morbillivirus that brought Brisbane racing to a standstill in 1994. Vogue is often overlooked in discussions about the greats of the turf, with many considering the horse and trainer a lovable team rather than credit the horse as a true champion. The fact remains that Superimpose was a champion, Better Loosen Up beat the best in the world, and Campaign King was a sensational sprinter. But when Vogue was at his peak, they could only chase him.
But that's how he used to win his races. He'd run them off their legs, and by the time he got to the furlong, the clock tower, they were tired chasing him. They used to make a run at him about the clock tower, but by the time they got past that, they were come to the end of their runs, and he was still going as good as ever, and he 9 times out of 10 held them off.
Here's Bone Crusher. He's pulled him to the outside, shooting around them, and our Waverley Star's going with it.
He was the star of arguably the greatest single race this country has seen. It was rightly called the race of the century, as the 2 Kiwi champions settled down to fight out the 1986 Cox Plate. But there could only be one winner, and somehow As good as his opponent was, you suspected Bone Crusher would come out on top. After all, his credentials going into this race of races were that of a world-class racehorse, a champion. As good, they claimed in New Zealand, as Balmerino, and who knows, perhaps another kindergarten. So what gave this racing machine from across the Tasman such a reputation? This may have something to do with it.
Into the straight, 400 metres to go. Sharp ace tackle by Antaeus, but Bone Crusher shot to the lead, and Flight Beer Show's now setting out after him. Bone Crusher in front, though. He's 200 metres to go. He's got 2 lengths on. By up wide, Flight Bijou and Random Chance. Bone Crusher still in front. Flight Bijou now coming at him hard. Bone Crusher in front. Flight Bijou's closing. Bone Crusher running about, but he's still in front. Flight Bijou trying to pull him back. Bone Crusher in front, and he's won the derby. Second is Flight Bijou.
And this.
Bone Crusher goes to Balrani. Eva Grace 2 away, then Canterbury Bill asked to go now, but it's Bone Crusher. He slipped away. A good break of 3 at the 250. Canterbury Bell's flat to the boards, and so too is Eva Grace, and lack of reason, but it's Bone Crusher. He's too good, the colt. He's got ears pricked, and he's away by 4 lengths going to the post. A bit like is charging after him late. Bone Crusher in front, a bit like is charging home on the inside, but he's too late. Bone Crusher beat a bit like it.
Australian racegoers had caught a glimpse of Bone Crusher during the autumn of 1985, but he failed to fill a placing in 3 starts as a juvenile. It was a different Bone Crusher 1 year later.
And Tristark had raced to the lead. Tristark leads the Tancred Stakes fields around the bend and straightened up in front of a bit like a, followed by the Vagrant, and then Dolchez, a handy Proverb behind them under pressure. Further back is Al Sophia and Rant and Rave down the extreme outside at the 200 mark, and a bit like her again beat off Tristark. A bit like her got clear of Tristark. The filly Dolchez trying hard to get to them. Rant and Rave, look at Bone Crusher. Bone Crusher down the outside is coming home right over the top of them. Rant and Rave and Bone Crusher. Bone Crusher won the Tancred. What a performance. Bone Crusher on the outside as they turn for home, and Easter is right on his wheel, and further back Handy Proverb. Over the rise now, Tierra Rista's the leader. Clear of Wilhelm. Drawn is coming through in the centre. Further out, Bone Crusher taking an age to get going. Easter is going with him, and on the extreme outside, Handy Proverb. 150 out, Tierra Rista's the leader. They're coming from all directions. It's Bone Crusher, Handy Proverb and Drawn. Bone Crusher put his head in front. He's got a great big heart. Bone Crusher, he'll win the derby. Bone Crusher, too good.
This was the start of Australia's love affair with the New Zealand superstar. He would return home after the 2-race Sydney campaign with one major aim, the Cox Plate. Bone Crusher resumed with close-up placings behind Waverley Star and Bourbon Boy in successive New Zealand starts, before arriving in Melbourne for the spring.
Bone Crusher's dashed away 3 in front into the straight. The Filbert second from At Talak running on always somehow. Further back, Tristark struggling with Our Sophia. At the 200, At Talak out after Bone Crusher's pegging it back at every stride. Bone Crusher the leader. At Talak challenging the inside, but Bone Crusher will win. He's hanging on and he comes away again to win a length to At Talak.
At Talak may have won the McKinnon Stakes Melbourne Cup double, but the 1986 spring belonged to one horse, Bone Crusher. The Underwood Stakes win made him a raging hot 4-1 on favourite for the Caulfield Stakes.
Around the turn, Stuart eases Bone Crusher up to join Tristark, who's under the whip from Priceless Prince, and the modern-day Big Red sprints to the lead, 250 to go. Shot away from Tristark, Black Knight, Peerless Prince and the Filbert. And look out, land of the rising sun. Here we come to Japan. Bone Crusher by 5 lengths, racing away. Scores by 5 lengths to Black Knight. Third placing to My Tristram's...
And then, the great race. Bone Crusher would have started an unbackable favourite in the Cox Plate. But the horse that beat him first up over 1,200 metres, racing under the name of our Waverley Star in Australia, had built an enormous reputation. We could talk forever about the 1986 Cox Plate, but the late, great Bill Collins described it best.
Here come the New Zealanders, Our Waverley Star and Bone Crusher. They've raced to the lead, 600 out. Have they gone too early? 2 lengths to Drought running up the third from Society Bay. They were followed then by Drawn under the whip at the head of the others, Dinky Flyer. But Our Waverley Star, he got a half length to Bone Crusher. He's gone for the whip on Bone Crusher. 3 lengths to Drought, followed then by Dinky Flyer and Drawn. But the 2 great New Zealanders have come away on the turn. Our Waverley Star, a half-length Bone Crusher. The Big Red won't give in. Drought running on. Bone Crusher responds to the whip. The roars of the crowd. He races up to Our Waverley Star. 100 out. Bone Crusher, Our Waverley Star. Stride for stride. nothing in it. Our Waverley Star, the rails, Bone Crusher the outside, and Bone Crusher races into equine immortality. $1.5 million as he photo finishes our Waverley Star.
Obviously one of the great races in Australian racing history, no question. With Bone Crusher, we'd sort of set his program to have him pretty well at his peak for the Cox. He's really been trained for the Japan Cup, but I think that was probably the reason why that when they kicked sort of so far out, he wasn't able to sort of foot it with Waverley Star. All of his preparations have been aimed at 1.5 miles. But all the same, he showed in that race outstanding courage. It was a great race, and it was just great to be a part of it, Gary.
It's something I've always wanted to do with the horse since, we discovered his enormous ability, is to prove that he's up to world class. Perhaps he's not, but it would be nice to find out. I've always believed that our best, and I repeat our best, Australasian thoroughbreds are up to American and European standard. Now, I've seen racing in America, but not in Europe, so perhaps don't know what I'm talking about, but you don't very often come along with a horse of the enormous ability of Bone Crusher. So it's a bit of a bee in my bonnet to prove that he is up to the world standard.
The world might have discovered what Australian and New Zealand racegoers already knew, but Bone Crusher's Japan Cup bid almost cost the champion his life. The Kiwi contracted a bacterial lung infection about a week before the rich 2,400-metre race and had to be withdrawn. But there were more important matters at hand than just missing a race. Bone Crusher's condition had deteriorated to the stage that trainer Frank Ritchie had real concerns for his champ. Bone Crusher recovered, but the illness took its toll. He resumed with a 4th placing in the Group 1 Lion Brown sprint at Waikato. Then his class got him through at Avondale. He was set for another Australian campaign, although Ritchie later had doubts that he was ready for it.
At Telex taken the lead at the 300, shot a length in front of Celastrius. Bone Crusher Stewart's gone for the whip as he makes his run on the outside, but at Telex got 2 lengths on him. Bone Crusher's going to be everything we thought to get near at Telex. At Telex a length and a half in front. Bone Crusher trying hard. He's gradually making ground. Bone Crusher coming at Telex. Will the champ get up? He lunges. Yes. Oh, it might be a dead heat.
It was the battle of the Cox Plate champion and the new breed weight for age class Melbourne Cup winner at Talac. It was another classic. It was to be Bone Crusher's last Australian win. A race Ritchie maintains took a lot out of his great galloper. He went on to win 3 more races in his homeland, including the Air New Zealand Stakes, and ran 3rd in the 1988 Australian Cup and Cox Plate. But whenever we think of Bone Crusher, one indelible image will always come to mind. The winner of that Cox Plate.
But you only dream of getting something like Bone Crusher. It just doesn't happen. They just don't come along, those sort of horses, to many people. I've been very fortunate that he's come into my life. And it's apart from all the gains that he's granted me, obviously more horses, more owners, it's the pleasure of having that horse go out and perform as he does is something that I don't think even the public can understand.
Octagonal may have attracted new racing fans all around the country, but arch-rival Saintly had his own personal cheer squad. The horse from heaven, they called him. And from the moment he arrived at Moonee Valley for the 1996 BMW Cox Plate, his legion of supporters turned out en masse, carrying banners promoting their champion. Saintly didn't let his supporters down on that day, or ever again. He won the Cox Plate after almost throwing the race away on the corner. Saintly had that something extra. He had the ability to change our thinking about him in the space of a home straight. He made the step from smart to outstanding 3-year-old in one run in the autumn of 1996. Then, during the following spring, he blossomed into one of the highest class speed stayers this country has seen. While the heights to which Saintly would eventually rise may not have been obvious from the outset, there was little doubt that Bart Cummings had a potential top liner when he arrived in Melbourne for the Carbine Club Stakes in the spring of '95. The raps were huge on the rangy chestnut, who had won 3 restricted races in New South Wales And he was back for a fortune on track, coming in from 6-1 to start 5-2 favourite. This is how he repaid that confidence.
Now, and wide out, here comes Saintly with a big run at the 300, and Touch of Force to leader. Saintly down the middle is coming after it, followed by Zuccarino, and then in square near the 200-metre mark, and Saintly wound up by Beedman. Dash to the lead from Touch of Force, Zuccarino, and then Brackenbury, but Saintly broke away, and the plunge is home. It's well clear, 3-4 to Brackenbury going to second, but all Saintly. Saintly wins it easily from Brackenbury. Third. An
unlucky second followed in the Sandown Guineas 2 weeks later, before Saintly went for a 3-month spell. He came back a much better galloper and was too good for the outstanding Juggler in the Group 2 Expressway Stakes at Randwick. Juggler turned the tables on Saintly at Weight for Age 2 weeks later, but it was the 3-year-old's following run that really stamped him as a potential world beater. The 1996 Australian Cup attracted a strong Weight for Age field, including the boom 3-year-old stayer and hot favourite Nothing Like a Dane, German import Viali, and New Zealander Star Dancer. Saintly toyed with them.
4 wide is Saintly, Star Dancer just behind them when they corner. Then Circles of Gold, Races Edge and Vialia from Peep on the Sly. Next Zern, 350 to go now. Nothing Like a Dane in front. He's had to go for the whip. Campaign Warrior and Saintly coming at them on the outside now. It's Saintly and Nothing Like a Dane, the 2 3-year-olds from Campaign Warrior, Vialia, Circles of Gold and Peep on the Sly. But it's all Saintly. He's raced away. 11 for Bart. Saintly by about 4 lengths. He gaps them and wins it easily.
Bart Cummings would take his star galloper back to Sydney for the remainder of that autumn campaign to test his staying potential. While the young gelding raced well against the likes of champion 3-year-old Octagonal, rising star Filont, and Nothing Like a Dane, he neither confirmed nor dispelled his claims as a stayer. His placings behind Octagonal in the Group 1 treble of the Rosehill Guineas, Mercedes Classic and AJC Derby were nonetheless fine performances for a horse with plenty of improvement left in him. Bart Cummings saw enough to start planning an ambitious spring. After well-beaten seconds to the much-improved Filont, Saintly appreciated the step up to 1900 metres in the Group 2 Hill Stakes, and won accordingly. But just when he appeared to be on track for the Melbourne Spring, he was beaten as a raging hot favourite in the Craven Plate by a handy 3-year-old called Adventurous.
A length in front now, the big chestnut is throwing down the gauntlet. Saintly on the outside is coming at Adventurous, who's feeling the pinch. Saintly has grabbed Adventurous close to home, and ladies and gentlemen, is he going to make it 1,000? Adventurous is kicking again, and Shane Dye's worried him out of it. You wouldn't believe it.
That run might have been put down to the great uncertainty of racing, but this lacklustre third in the Metropolitan as 10-9 favourite provided greater concern.
His Hula Flight getting between them, and Saintly on the outside has rounded them up very quickly. Saintly has raced clear with Hula Flight. They're fighting it out from Fewer Chosen, and Nothing Like a Dane coming down the outside. Saintly and Hula Flight. Nothing Like a Dane is coming fast in the last little bit, but Hula Flight.
Saintly was conceded little chance in a race like the Cox Plate because of his extravagant galloping action, the tight bend of the Moonee Valley Circuit, and his last 2 Sydney efforts. That was until the field's numbers dropped away to just 8 runners, and it became obvious the son of Sky Chase would get room to gallop. Of course, a trainer by the name of J.B. Cummings declared his charge the ideal Cox Plate type 2 months earlier.
Racing. Jumped at a beautiful line. Crying Game a bit slow into stride, and All Our Mob bounced quickly with Adventurous. Crying Game picking up ground. Filante and Juggler away well. Further out, All Our Mob. Adventurous in front, down to the winning post now from Crying Game and Filante third. All Our Mob goes back fourth, outside Juggler 2, then to Saintly, then Anthems and Octagonal last of all, going out of the straight. Adventurous the leader. At the 1700 metre mark, inclined to fight with the rider at the moment. Adventurous a length. Crying Game, 1.5 for Filante third. 2 further back is All Our Mob, 2 to Juggler, and they're stringing right out in the Cox Plate. 3 further back behind Juggler is Saintly, 2 to Anthems, and 3 last of all is Octagonal, and he must be 12 to 15 lengths off the lead. Around the turn coming up inside the 1400, and Adventurous the leader in the Cox Plate, 3/4 Crying Game, up at his quarters now, 2 to Filante, getting a nice run third, 3 lengths further back, All Our Mob running fourth, 1.5 Juggler fifth, 2 then to Saintly, 2 to Anthems, 3 to Octagonal, he must be 15 off the front. Down the back, 1,000 to go. In the Cox Plate, and Crying Game goes up to Adventurous. 2.5 further back, Falonde. 3 further back, All Our Mob. Juggler on the outside a bit, 3/4. 2 to Saintly, 1.5 Anthems, and 2 to Octagonal, still 12 lengths off them around the turn at the 800-metre mark. Crying Game took over now from Adventurous. Falonde comes out now for Dittman and is striding quickly to the lead now. A length further back, All Our Mob. They're followed by Juggler. Saintly peeling out deep, and then Anthems. They're bunching up. 600 to go in the plate. Octagonal last, but coming out now. He's about 4 lengths off them. Crying Game is grabbed by Falonde. Juggler wider out on the track with All Our Mob, and Saintly putting in a run out wider. All Our Mob and Falonde being tackled by Juggler, and the widest runner is Saintly with a run. All Our Mob, Falonde now from Juggler and Saintly. 4 in line, 2 to Octagonal. They turn for home, and the whips are cracking. It's All Our Mob, Saintly, Juggler and Falonde. Here's a great go, 150 to go, Falonde. Saintly coming at it on the outside. Saintly getting up to Falonde and Juggler the centre. Saintly on the outside. Falonde strikes back, dead heat. Saintly may be a nose, Falonde, nothing in it.
I decided to run him in the Cox Plate. I thought that'd be an ideal race for him, the way he looked at that stage. He picked up after going to Melbourne and did extremely well. He won the Cox Plate, and I was quite happy to think that he'd have a good chance in the Melbourne Cup. I worked him on the morning of the Derby day, and Derby morning, and he worked sensationally, I thought. And from then I thought he'd have a good chance in the Melbourne Cup, which he won.
Saintly's Cox Plate victory had established him as a top-class racehorse, but there was still some doubt about his staying ability. His next contract, meeting a class staying field that included the much-lauded international Oscar Schindler, was supposed to be his acid test.
It's great shot, now being pressured by Few Are Chosen. Super Slew to third, a length away, Nothing Like a Dane, followed by Court of Honour. Centre go next, and Saintly's on the inside, followed by Istedard as they turn for home. Now Saintly taken to the outside and is starting to work into it. It's great shot being tackled by Nothing Like a Dane. Nothing Like a Dane took the lead. Here is Saintly. Saintly's coming after him. Count Shivers working into the race. Then Super Slew, followed by Senator running on. Oscar Schindler struggling. Saintly hit the lead in the Melbourne Cup. He drew a length in front of Nothing Like a Dane. Count Shivers, Skybow running on. Saintly in front for Darren Beedman. Bart Cummings has got his 10th Melbourne Cup. Saintly's going to win the Melbourne Cup for Darren Beedman and Bart Cummings. Saintly first.
It was the making of a champion, and the crowning moment for the king of trainers. And what better horse to give the great JB Bart Cummings his magical 10th Melbourne Cup win?
I think the Cox Plate and the Melbourne Cup, not much between the two of them. They're both great performances, and just highlighted what a great horse he was. The horse from heaven and the boy to heaven. They both combined very well. So we liked the horse. He had an opportunity riding Octagonal or Saintly. I had a good talk with him, and he decided to ride Saintly. This was about 4 months before, and he thanked me for talking him into it.
I think the Melbourne Cup was his greatest win. A lot of people were doubting whether he could really run the 2 mile, being beaten in the Metropolitan. But the horse just went from strength to strength after the Cox Plate. I didn't think that there was that much improvement in him, but he was able to get into a good position, and just, I guess, with the authority that he won and the stamina that he displayed over the final stages of the race really showed his superiority. He was difficult in the sense that you couldn't really muscle him out in a finish. You really had to try and treat him with kid gloves, and he was a real confidence horse. If you could let him think he was going better than what he was and make him feel good underneath you, then he'd respond a lot better. And that was probably one of the main keys to him. And he wasn't a horse that you could have up on the speed. You had to ride him back a little bit. So that comes into play, that you're going to have to be following good horses or getting good runs through the race around about the half-mile mark.
Australian racing had a new hero, one that could sprint past the best weight-for-age gallopers and then outstay the best stayers. The world was waiting. Cummings decided the time was right for Saintly to take on the best international gallopers in the rich Japan Cup. The 2,400 metres at set weights looked ideal, but the milk run flight to Tokyo took its toll, and Saintly became a sick horse on the eve of the race. Bart immediately scratched Saintly. He was closer to this horse than possibly any he's trained, and he wasn't about to risk him for any prize.
He went to Japan after that and got sick after the Melbourne Cup, and I really didn't think, I thought, geez, this horse is going to have to be a super horse to be able to come back after nearly dying in Japan. And he went on and won first up at Caulfield, and it was just a barnstorming finish, and come home over the top of him. And I thought that this was going to be his best campaign. Like, everything led to saying that he was going to be better as he got older, but just maturity, his stature. He was really starting to grow into himself, really.
At the 600-metre marker, half Regal Centre still with the rail and Flavour right there with them. He's moving up 3 wide, 1.5 Carptingly Star Dancer. Saintly is in an awkward place with Rubidium outside him coming to the turn. Lockray takes off, Doremus last. At the bend, cut up rough the middle, Flavour the outside, Regal Centre turn in front of Carptingly. And then came Star Dancer and 2 or 3 lengths further back. Saintly spotting the leaders, 5.250 out. Regal Centre fights back on the inside again, puts his nose in front of Cut Up Rough. Flavour on the outside, then came Star Dancer. Saintly is lengthening, and in the last little bit, he's storming over the top of them. The mighty horse from heaven. Saintly has got up to win it.
We couldn't have known we were seeing this wonderful galloper race for the last time. We had only just embraced him as the new champion of the Australian turf when leg problems shortened Saintly's career after just 23 starts. He was given more than a year to recover from an offside sesamoid strain. But when his good leg went after a track gallop on the Eagle Farm dirt track, Cummings had no hesitation retiring his champion. Saintly won from 1,200 to 3,200 metres against the best in the land, and didn't miss a place in his last 19 race starts. Saintly's racing days may have ended in the autumn of 1997, but his winning run wasn't over. He ran away with the 1997 Australian Horse of the Year title, and with our hearts. Octagonal was public property. The Big O, as they called him. He was the people's horse. Australia has seen more talented horses than Octagonal. But what separated the Big O from just about any other horse in recent history wasn't his sheer racing ability. It was his enormous heart and his remarkable will to win.
Coming down to approach the home turn now. Magnet Bay the inside and Istadard lead, Perfect Bound, Royal Line. Nothing Like a Dane on the rails, 5th around the turn as Juggler creeps a bit close around the outside. Viander Cross is under the whip behind it. Octagonal is getting onto the back of Juggler now. And then came Doremus when they sweep into the straight where Istadard hit the front at the 400. And Istadard dashed out by 2 lengths now to Juggler giving chase. Here comes the Big O. Octagonal is winding up with a run down the outside. Juggler gets to Istadard at the 300. Octagonal in turn is chiming in, and Gold City gets up on the inside. Juggler Istadard, Octagonal the outside, and Gold City along the rail. Juggler just in front. Gold City pegging it back with the Big O coming at them. It's Gold City, the Big O, the outside, they hit it. Oh, gee, this is close. Either
the 1987 Australian Cup was a trademark Octagonal performance. This was the horse that notched up 9 of his 10 Group 1 wins by an aggregate of less than 2 1/4 lengths. The champion stuck his head out on the line to win 6 Group 1s in photo finishes. John Hawke Superstar became such a household name during his 3- and 4-year-old seasons that you almost forget he was the champion 2-year-old of his year.
Starting to wind up at the 200, Tuscany Flyer headed shaded. Here's the big bloke from the Shaky Isles, our Maze K, and Octagonal on the extreme outside, but our Maze K the leader. Octagonal cutting him down with every stride. Octagonal coming home the better and got there on the line.
Quite a remarkable feat. The horse that went on to excel at 2,400 metres against the best in the land was able to beat freak New Zealand sprinter Our Mace K over 1,200 metres. The hustle and bustle of the capacity field over 1,200 metres beat him in the Golden Slipper, but he appreciated the step up to 1,400 metres in the Sire's Produce.
Outside, coming to the 200 mark, and Zed Richards just the leader from Exclusive Halo. Here they come now, Strategic, Octagonal and Show of Force. Little Show of Force is squeezing through in the centre. Show of Force and Octagonal hit the lead from Strategic. Show of Force and Octagonal. Isolde coming late on the inside as they hit the line. Octagonal, Isolde.
Isolde got her revenge in the Group 1 Champagne Stakes. In a photo, of course. But Octagonal was due a well-earned rest. Time to plan a big spring. The champion 2-year-old had furnished into a superb individual during his spell, and he was primed for early glory. He followed the win in the listed Heritage Stakes with another in the Group 3 Roman Consul, but couldn't match the sheer brilliance of our Maskey in the Caulfield Guineas at his first Melbourne start. He was looking for longer, and his second Melbourne start, well, that was another matter.
Off the back in the Cox Plate, and it's our Maskey. Over on the inside and neck in front with Stony Bay putting the pressure on the outside. Solvit is further out on the track with Station Hand. Then Just Apollo. Damewin is waiting for a run at the 600-metre mark, and further back in the race, Mahogany off the rail. Pulled out wide on the track is Octagonal, and the widest runner is Jearn. Our Maskey struggling. He's gone. Station Hand has hit the front. Damewin carry back through the field, hampered badly, Station Hand in front. Here's Octagonal and Jearn with a mighty run. Then getting through is on the inside Mahogany. Mahogany rails up with Octagonal at the 200-metre marker on the outside. Octagonal, Mahogany coming at him, stride for stride now on the Cox Plate. Mahogany, Octagonal, Octagonal, Mahogany. Octagonal's got his nose in front. Octagonal wins the Cox Plate.
I think one of the biggest highlights was winning a Cox Plate. You know, we all have dreams and ambitions and goals, and one of my goals, well, my biggest goal was to win a Melbourne Cup, a Cox Plate and a Golden Slipper. And of course I'd won before 95 a Melbourne Cup and a Golden Slipper, and I hadn't won a Cox Plate. And when I won on him that day, it really hit me that I've achieved a major pinnacle of my career. I would hate to have finished riding and say to my kids I never won that race when I'm watching it. In years to come when I'm 70 or 80 or 60 at home watching the Cox Plate would have annoyed me immensely. So when I won on him, it really hit me, and I had a tear and I had a little cry, and I was just so happy and so glad. And that's one of the biggest moments of my career.
Oh, I got no doubt it was the Cox Plate. I mean, he was, at that point in time, he perhaps wasn't what you call the champion. He was a young 3-year-old, yeah, on the verge, and to win that sort of thrust him into stardom, and I'm sure that was, his greatest win. Mahogany, he was a great season, tough, hard horse, and, it was a head-and-head all the way down the straight, and it was just great to see him win on the day. But he had some other great wins, but I still feel that was his greatest win.
Australia had its champion 3-year-old. Octagonal was beaten by Nothing Like a Dane in the Victoria Derby, but the debate over which horse should have won still rages today. It was a minor hiccup. Autumn awaited.
Super Slew the leader. Darren Beedman hard at work on Octagonal on the outside. Bravo Zulu in third place, and then Falante, who looks to be making heavy weather of it, and wide on the track. Payback Time. Future King is running on well. In the straight, Octagonal flat to the boards to head. Super Slew. They're clear of Falante. Bravo Zulu on the fence. Octagonal full bore. Falante is having another go at him. Octagonal in front. Beedman's got to ride desperately. Falante can't quite pick him up, and Octagonal fell in to win the Guineas. In the straight, Delinquent the leader. Nothing Like a Dane looming up on the outside. Octagonal and Saintly right out in the middle of the track. Nothing Like a Dane hit the lead at the 200, but Octagonal has gobbled him up on the outside. Saintly is going to have the last shot at them. Octagonal just in front of Nothing Like a Dane. Saintly on the outside. Octagonal just in front as they get near home. Saintly lunged. Octagonal. And here come the 3-year-olds down the outside. Circles of Gold in front at the 200. Count Chivas in the centre. Octagonal. Saintly's gone. It's Count Chivas and Octagonal. Octagonal headed Count Chivas close to home in the Mercedes Classic, and Octagonal, desperately ridden by Beedman, is drawing away. He'll win. Where Nothing Like a Dane takes the lead. Nothing Like a Dane hit the front up the rise. Falante's the first to go after him. Here comes Saintly with Octagonal down the extreme outside. Out after them now. Falante headed Nothing Like a Dane. Further out Saintly, and here comes the big O. Octagonal with the last run at them. Falante, Saintly and Octagonal. They've come away from Nothing Like a Dane. Saintly and Octagonal. Beedman throwing everything at Octagonal. He gets there. Yes, Octagonal wins the Derby.
Octagonal's greatest performance? Quite probably. But it wouldn't be the last time the champion won a race on heart alone. Far from it.
It's hard to narrow it down to just one single race, but I think his 3-year-old year was the year that was the wonderful year when he won the Cox Plate, and then come back to Sydney in the autumn and won the Canterbury Guineas, Rosehill Guineas, Mercedes Classic and the Derby. And Like he beat horses like Saintly for Gronty that went on, you know, what they went on and did. And it was something that no other horse had done. So I think those series of races were the great thrilling times.
Much has been written and said about Octagonal's disappointing 4-year-old spring, when he raced well below his best form. With this Underwood Stakes win against an average weight for age field, the only respite in a 7-race campaign. We were disappointed, but the pressure of trying to get the champion back to his best must have been unbearable.
Well, you know, we sort of opted to bring him back, and at the start of the campaign, everything had worked terrific. He'd come up tremendous, and I think we started him in the Manikato, and things went backwards from there. But he'd sort of lost his train of thought a little bit as the preparation went on, and he was an entire, of course, and his whole form just sort of slipped. But he eventually got back to winning the Underwood, and we put Darren Beeben back on him, who had, you know, won on him previous, and he got the best out of him, you know, on that particular day. But in springtime, very hard for entires during that time, because they got their mind on other things, and that was perhaps, you know, the low light of his career. It's never easy when you've got a horse of that calibre, you know, and, you know, when you're sort of top 2-year-old, top 3-year-old, then you're trying to make him a top 4-year-old, and being an entire, which means in turn you'd go to stud. You're always under X amount of pressure, but pressure's only what you put on yourself, and he was a tremendous horse to train, and I was more relieved more for the horse winning, more so than myself. Nearly every time he won, the only one was the Mercedes at Rosehill. I actually thought he got beat that particular day, but he just seemed to know where the line was. He only won by short margins, but he always seemed to bob at the right time. And the Mercedes, he was beaten one stride before, in front on the line, and was beaten one stride later. That's the type of horse he was. He just knew where the line was.
Their perseverance was rewarded, as was the loyalty of Octagonal's legion of supporters. Second, the juggler in the Apollo Stakes indicated he was getting back to form. But who could have expected this?
Early, and Octagonal is now tacking on at the tail. Past the 800 mark for Lonte, about a neck on Dupain. A length to Juggler, who's racing one off the fence. Dye makes a quick move on Octagonal. Glenn Boss on Juggler. Tried to go with him, but Octagonal showed an amazing turn of speed past the 600. He's exploded around the outside to go to the front as they come to the turn. Daring tactics by Shane Dye. Will they pay off? He's got Octagonal in full flight on the corner, led by a length and a half to Juggler, who's moving to second. Falonte third, flat to the boards, and the other two are beaten off. Octagonal first into the straight. He's got a 2-length break on Juggler. Boss goes for the whip on Juggler, who's coming out after Rocky. Octagonal's in front, 100 out. Juggler is trying desperately to pick him up, but bold tactics by Shane Dye are going to pay off, and he pinches the Chipping Norton.
We talked about it before the race, and you know, I said, you just ride your own race. I said, you might be able to, you know, they all say he's just a plugger, this fella, but I can tell you he can run. And so he just, it was a brilliant ride, and no horse would have matched what he did that day. I think he ran his last 3 in 32.4 or something.
No, there was no pressure on me the day of the Chipping Norton Stakes, because he wasn't meant to win the race. Juggler was meant to win the race, and then Falonte, Octagonal third. And I did something daring that day, which we all know, and he won. So I was the hero. Then in the Australian Cup, he wasn't favourite again. Everyone expected Juggler to win. And of course, he won by a nose, and I rode him a bit different again, and it was a very good ride that day, I felt. I felt that was probably a better ride than in the Chipping Norton Stakes, the Australian Cup. So every time you win on him, there's more pressure, and you start going out there thinking, geez, I can't do this. I can't take off and put 5 lengths on them at the half mile, and if something runs them down, you're a mug. So naturally, I had that always in the back of my mind, that he was a people's champion. They expected him to win, and I had to form 100%.
Here comes the big O. Octagonal is winding up with a run down the outside. Juggler gets to Istedard at the 300. Octagonal in turn is chiming in, and Gold City gets up on the inside. Juggler, Istedard, Octagonal the outside, and Gold City along the rail. Juggler just in front. Gold City pegging it back with the big O coming at them. It's Gold City, the big O, the outside, they hit it. Oh, gee, this is close. Either Octagonal or Gold City.
Vintage Octagonal. Never going to win until the last stride. And what better way to farewell Melbourne than winning the Australian Cup in a photo? If the Australian Cup, Cox Plate and AJC Derby were testament to his courage, what word describes his second successive Mercedes win? He was not only beaten several times in running, he was, for all intents and purposes, beaten on the line. The camera said otherwise.
He's about to shut into the clear on Ockie, but he's giving them a fair start as they turn for home. Magnet Bay and Circles of Gold. Estadard looming up to them from Arcady. Octagonals into the clear. He's starting to wind up here. He comes, the big O down the outside. Estadard, Arcady, but Octagonal is getting to them with every stride. Arcady put his head in front. Octagonal is lunging as he always does. Estadard fighting back. Arcady and Octagonal. Oh, Arcady maybe. Arcady maybe a nose to Octagonal, who tried his heart out.
It sparked scenes the like of which have not been seen on Australian racecourses for decades. The crowd went delirious that their mighty champion had made the complete comeback from the racing wilderness to record his third straight Group 1 win and the 10th of his career. Octagonal would not bow out on a winning note, beaten by the underrated Intergaze in the Queen Elizabeth Stakes at Randwick. But the huge gathering that turned up for his last race sent him off a winner anyway.
I mean, it's like anything, you love to go out a winner. On the day, he was beaten by, you know, a young and up-and-coming horse, but, you know, he sort of still fought it out that day, and, you know, it was tremendous to get the reception that he got, you know, to be beaten, but as it would have been great for him to go out a winner, but I think he still went out a winner, even though he was beaten on the day.
Well, he meant a great lot to all the family, you know, I mean, everybody loved him, and he's Bob and I always, you know, always loved racing, and to find a horse like him when we've been doing it for so many years was just great, and it's been a great help to the whole of our racing enterprise because he's gone on and been a stallion.
The best staying mare of her generation. That description aptly fits Let's Elope, the mare from New Zealand who entered the Bart Cummings stable early in the spring of '91 without so much as a second glance. Despite a close second to champion filly Let's Score in New Zealand, nobody noticed the big mare when she first stepped out to race in Melbourne. Not even after this.
At the 300-metre mark, Shavano Miss under the whip in front by a length to Leggings Makeup Lady, and then Special Sculpture threading through near the inside from Let's Elope, Volcanic and Reno Bell, but Shavano Miss inside the 150, led by a length and a half to Makeup Lady. Reno Bell's finishing very quickly. Shavano Miss in front, Reno Bell flashing home, but didn't make it. Shavano Miss has won it by about a head to Reno Bell. Now Let's Elope or Makeup Lady for the minor end of the prize.
My first introduction was, I went down to Melbourne around about this time, end of August in that particular year that arrived from New Zealand, and had a bit of a long coat and, you know, looked rather plain and backward, but it was a terrific constitution and a great appetite, and she did improve a great deal as time went on. She had some little form in New Zealand, but she had a tremendous appetite and a tough constitution, and given a dry track she looked pretty impressive to me. How far she'd go was anyone's guess. You can only not put them in and try them, and as I said, the conditions given on that spring were dry and it suited her very well.
It was only going to take one more run before racegoers around the country would notice the Kiwi mare with the funny name. And what a run it was. She went into the Turnbull Stakes a place chance by virtue of the fact that Bart Cummings trained her. She emerged a different proposition.
He's kicked away Durbridge. He led by more than 2 lengths. Ivory Way has gone. Let's Elope's running on the outside very powerfully. 200 metres left to go. Durbridge in front with Let's Elope challenging strongly. Let's Elope bolted to the lead now from Durbridge, and then Prince Salieri and Rentino, but Let's Elope's racing away from them. Prince Salieri runs to second, but Let's Elope has scored by over 2 lengths.
Suddenly people were realising the maestro, Bart Cummings, might have another cup winner on his hands. But which cup? The bookies didn't bother asking. They elevated her to favouritism for the Caulfield Cup and close to the top of the list for the Flemington 2-miler. By the time they lined up at the Heath, Let's Elope was a clear Caulfield Cup favourite.
Prince Salieri first for home from Ivory Way, Dr. Grace in the centre. Then Lord Revenant, Mantelpiece and Royal Creation from Let's Elope. Ivory Way in front, Dr. Grace coming at it, Royal Creation looking for the way clear. And wider out is Lord Revenant, Prince Salieri, but Ivory Way still in front of Royal Creation. Let's Elope down the outside, Royal Creation and Ivory Way from Let's Elope. It's Royal Creation, Ivory Way and Let's Elope. They hit the line photo. Let's Elope on the outside perhaps.
The Turnbull win was a great cup trial. But the Caulfield Cup win left some questions unanswered. She won the race, but only just. And she would have to carry an extra 3 kilograms if she was to become the first mare since Light Fingers to claim the double. She'd have to do what even the great Leilani couldn't. If there was any question about her Melbourne Cup chances, though, the McKinnon Stakes seemed to provide all the answers. Superimpose, Stylish Century, and the Cox Plate winner Surface Paradise were among a class weight-for-age field.
And at the 200-metre mark, she's dashed to the front. Superimpose coming out after him. Surface can't go on. Let's Elope in front of Superimpose. And Let's Elope will win it by a length and a half to Superimpose second.
Only the nature of the Melbourne Cup itself, in which every horse has some support, prevented Let's Elope from starting an unbackable favourite.
And here comes Let's Elope on the outside. Shiva's Revenge is bullocking his way through the back and then moves. 400 metres left to go. Ivory Way in front, being joined by the stablemates Rashik and El Meheb. Down the outside, Let's Elope. Here Superimpose, followed by Castletown. Shiva's Revenge. Let's Elope hit the front of the cup. 300 metres to run. Ivory Way battling back, then Superimpose and Shiva's Revenge late. But Let's Elope has burst away, and the Foster's Melbourne Cup belongs to the mare. Let's Elope bolts the cup in, wins by 3 lengths, and it's a Cummings Quinella. Shiva's Revenge got second, close up on the inside, Magnolia Hall.
There's no doubt he should have won Shiva's Revenge. Like I said, I was bolting at the 500 metres looking to get out, and I got out. She came up and around and pushed me back in. And Stephen King got a couple of months for it, I think. And the amount of ground I took off her the last furlong was incredible. And he really hit the line, and Bart didn't want me to protest when I hopped off. And of course I wanted to, and I wasn't going to, and I was. And I've got 30 seconds to make my mind up by the time I popped off the horse to hop on the scars. Hopped off the scars, and I said, no, I'll protest. And I still believe he should have got the protest. But of course it was a Melbourne Cup, and it's very hard to overturn Melbourne Cups when you've got beat by 2 or 3 lengths.
The Grand Mare had earned a break. She'd proven herself a champion stayer with 4 straight wins. But Bart Cummings knew she could prove herself a champion over all distances. She had the will to win.
Given on a dry track, I'd say she was. Leilani was very good and Light Fingers, but they could handle both. But on a dry track, I think Let's Elope was unbeatable.
But still Campaign King by 2.5, Dr. Grace. Prince Salieri now, and here's Let's Elope starting to wind up strongly at the 200. Campaign King is grabbed by Prince Salieri, and now Let's Elope is coming home. Prince Salieri via neck. Let's Elope with big bounces coming after him. Let's Elope and Prince Salieri. Prince Salieri has his nose in front. She bobbed the mare. Dr. Grace still, and Shavano Miss fighting it out from Let's Elope, who has to find something with courage on the outside. Still Dr. Grace in front. Let's Elope tries hard. She's coming home. She'll get there again. Let's Elope right on the post. Nailed Dr. Grace. Another courageous win at the 400-metre mark now. And it's Prince Salieri racing up to the lead. Shiva's Revenge a length and a half behind. And here comes the big mare. Let's Elope is winding up powerfully. She's racing up on the outside to Prince Salieri. Shiva's Revenge in the centre is not as good as this mare. No way. She's racing away. The champion mare's racing clear. Let's Elope from Shiva's Revenge. And Let's Elope dominates the Australian Cup and wins it by 3.5.
The mare had her problems from that point, but she'd clearly established herself as a champion with 7 straight wins against the best horses in the land, under all conditions from 1400 to 3200 metres. After a string of outs brought about by continued suspensory problems, Let's Elope had 1 great Australian win left in her, against 1 great horse.
The match race was organised by Let's Elope and David Hayes is better loosen up, and the VATC committee agreed to run the match race at Caulfield, and it created tremendous interest, and My jockey, I've forgotten, was suspended, I believe, at the time. Anyway, Mick Dippin was available and I gave him the ride and he duly won.
It looks to be Let's Elope going a little bit better than Better Loosen Up at the 200-metre mark, but the champion's fighting back on the rail. Let's Elope about a neck in front of Better Loosen Up. He won't let the mare get too far in front, but she'll be too good in the run home. And Let's Elope wins it by a length and a half to Better Loosen Up. A great challenge between two great racehorses.
It's history now that Let's Elope was second over the line behind the great Superimpose in the 92 Cox Plate, only to be relegated to fifth in the roughest ever running of that race. She was pulled out of the Melbourne Cup late on race day, before going into the Japan Cup short on preparation, and still managing a remarkable seventh to Tokai Teo. Let's Elope would finish her career in the United States, and while she never reached the heights of the spring of 91 or the autumn of 92, she won one of her 6 starts, finishing third on 3 other occasions, and earned a further $300,000, taking her career to 11 wins from 26 starts and $3.3 million in prize money. Let's Elope was retired to Kentucky, where her matings with Danzig and Stormcat produced foals with outstanding conformation. She returned to Australia in 1998.
He never really seemed to get the adulation that some other horses got when he was racing. Although late in the piece, I think people appreciated the fact that he raced for so long at the highest level. And there was a lot of people who really did like the horse and liked to see him race. But I think probably in his 3- and 4-year-old year, he never really got the true, even though he won Horse of the Year, he didn't really get the accolades that some other horses do get.
Mahogany was something of a contradiction. Trained by the irrepressible Lee Friedman and winner of the Victoria and AJC Derbies, he went on to become one of Australia's best sprinters and the finest first-up performer of his generation. He had the lot: speed, stamina, courage, personality, and arguably the most colourful owner-trainer-rider combination in the land. Lloyd Williams, Lee Friedman, Greg Hall.
I think that the Friedmans thought he had average 2-year-old ability. I remember Lee Friedman, when he ran at Sandown, said to me after the run at Sandown that he thought he would make a group horse after the Sandown run as a 2-year-old. But he certainly wasn't suggesting that he was going to be a multiple Group 1 winner. He said he thought he was probably a group type horse, because it was an impressive run first up, and he was quite impressive at his second start at Moonee Valley. But Greg Hall, who you'd be aware I've had a long association with, said that one of the things that I needed to do with him was to geld him. You know, there's been a lot of great horses gelded after their first or second run. Kingston Town comes to mind as one, but we immediately gelded him, and he came back out in the autumn of that season, 1993, and he had a couple of runs in Melbourne. And they weren't inspiring runs, I'd have to say. His first 2 runs after he'd been gelded, he ran at Flemington and ran at Caulfield, 1,200-metre race and a 1,400-metre race. And they were, as an old punter as I am, I would have classed them as only fair. But he went to Queensland after that as a 2-year-old, and Mickey Dittman got on him at Doomben, and he was particularly impressive. He thrived in Queensland.
Here he comes, Mahogany. Pimpala's son has pulled to the outside and he's running on gamely. Mahogany's hit the front now from Santiago Bell and he's shot away. Looks as though he's got it won. Pimpala's son trying hard on the outside, but it's all Mahogany. Mahogany's far too good in the run to the post. He scores well. Pimpala's son second. Santiago Bell third.
You know, we went back from Brisbane down to Sydney, and he was going to get trained for all the major Group 1 type racing for a 3-year-old in the spring. He was very impressive first up in Sydney. Fresh, very fresh, coming straight off Queensland. You know, Greggy thought he was that day that, you know, it was the best thing he'd ever been on. He couldn't get over how he'd improved from Queensland. But, you know, he subsequently raced in another 1,200-metre race and then went to Newcastle in that typical 1,600-metre race at Newcastle and was extremely disappointing. Now, you know, he had 3 runs in Sydney. Now, we probably hadn't learnt anything, But we brought him back to Melbourne for the Caulfield Guineas, and I remember having this discussion with Lee Friedman, you know, let's space his races out and freshen him up a bit. And he went to the Caulfield Guineas, you know, with, I think it was 21 days, no, it was more than that, it was 24 days between runs, and he won the Caulfield Guineas.
Mahogany's out to challenge near the inside. Port Watch fights back, and the stablemates turn in front. Port Watch, Mahogany travelling the better on the outside. Hall went for home at the 200-metre mark now. Mahogany got a neck in front of Port Watch. A gap in the field too. Let's Cut Loose and Kendall Star, but Mahogany under the whip is holding Port Watch, and Mahogany will win the Guineas. Mahogany from Port Watch, a Friedman Quinella.
Out here's Mahogany. Mahogany's cruised up to hit the front, 400 to go and win away. 2 lengths in front of Pride of Rancho. McGuan is into the clear and running on, and then Kendall Star. Battlehawk can't go on, and then Let's Cut Loose, but Mahogany has bolted away. 200 metres to go, it's all Mahogany. He's got the Derby parcelled up, 5 or 6 in front of Let's Cut Loose. Shelves is running on strongly with Waikikamukow, but Mahogany wins easily. Mahogany's won the Derby in a canter.
Mahogany was clearly a class middle-distance galloper, but there was some suggestion that it was his talent only that carried him the 2,500 metres of the Derby. He returned in the autumn, and people were starting to doubt Mahogany after a close call in the Australian Guineas and a third of 6 in the 2,000-metre Australian Cup. His efforts in 2 subsequent Sydney runs changed their minds.
Hall's got to get busy, although he is peeping over the left shoulder. Tenner's running on strongly with Sable Dreamer, but Mahogany goes right on by and dashes to the lead past the 200 over Western Red, followed by Tenner and Sable Dreamer, but home goes Mahogany. Mahogany putting a gap in them in the last bit, is racing away, and he's going to win the Tulloch Stakes in a breeze. Mahogany by 3 lengths. Stream outside as they come over the rise. Greg Hall looks extra confident on Mahogany. Zaremba's in front as they top the hill. Mahogany is gobbling him up very quickly with Waikikamukow and Arborea down the outside, but Mahogany swept to the lead, 100 out. He's got them struggling. Waikikamukow in second place, can't do any better, and then Arborea and Fraternity, but Mahogany flat to the boards is holding Waikikamukow, and it's the 2-state Derby double to Mahogany.
Mahogany resumed for his eagerly awaited spring campaign with this effort.
Mahogany's coming after him. Schartenheit's battling. Credit account for the run on the outside. State Tar's about 2 lengths. Mahogany's got him, I reckon. Hall had a look over his shoulder. State Tar's grabbed by Mahogany in the last 100. Here's the champion racing away now. Mahogany first up. It'll be a brilliant win. And he draws away Mahogany to win it by 2 lengths to State Tar's. Credit account third.
But then the warning signal started sounding. He had to pull out all stops to beat State Taj in a photo finish in the Craigley Stakes as a 5-2 on favourite, and then ran third in the Underwood. Lee Friedman spelled the gelding when he could manage only 7th of 9 in the Turnbull. That run, the decision not to continue on a Cox Plate campaign, and his very next race start changed the way racegoers perceived Mahogany from that point on.
Running to the 500-metre mark now. Hariba under a tight rein has gone up to join Sequalo, Keltrice, Brawny Spirit on the rail. 2 lengths behind them, then Eladon called on, and they're followed then by Mahogany under a bit of pressure at the 300-metre mark now. And it's on the outside, Hariba. He's calling on him to do something, sticking with him there. On the outside is Eladon. In fact, he's in trouble, Hariba. Eladon's claimed him, and Mahogany now. And Keltrice fighting back. No Hariba. It's a shock. It's Mahogany dashing to the front, and Mahogany scores. Mahogany's beaten Eladon.
Suddenly, Australia had a new top-line sprinter. And we were starting to realise that the galloper was almost unbeatable when produced fresh. The 4-year-old Mahogany ran into Scalacci and Hariba at his next 2 sprint starts, then failed in Sydney. So Friedman spelled his horse again. This time, though, things were different. His controversial owner, Lloyd Williams, hatched a plan that all but worked, and it took 2 champions to bring it undone.
Mahogany got the run at the 300, and Mahogany took the lead from Baryshnikov coming after him. Then Pearl Prince and Jern's unwinding now. It's Mahogany under the whip. He's got Baryshnikov beaten. Storm along the inside, and Jern. Mahogany in front. Jern's coming at him. Mahogany, Jern. Jern, Mahogany. They go to the line. Jern just got there to beat Mahogany. What a race.
That's right. He resumed over 1,600 metres this time. But that was nothing. The horse was freshened and set to take his place in the Cox Plate without a run for 7 weeks.
Well, it wasn't that difficult in terms of being able to use so many of the course proppers around Melbourne. I think we got Sandown on a couple of occasions. We certainly got Caulfield on a couple of occasions, and we usually had a fairly good supply of workmates for him. And he was one of those sort of horses, and being by Last Tycoon, that he didn't really need hard racing. And we discovered fairly early in the piece that, you know, hard racing he trained off pretty quickly. So the plan was to have him ready for the Cox Plate second up. And I don't think we could have had him much better. I thought the horse was pretty well spot on the day.
Here's Octagonal and Germ with a mighty run. Then getting through is on the inside Mahogany. Mahogany rails up with Octagonal at the 200-metre marker on the outside. Octagonal. Mahogany coming at him stride for stride now on the Cox Plate. Mahogany, Octagonal. Octagonal, Mahogany. Octagonal's got his nose in front. Octagonal wins the Cox Plate.
I probably enjoyed that race more than any other race of Mahogany's. I got beaten by one of my best friends, Jack Ingham. I got beaten by a jockey who's a great friend of mine, Shane Dyers. So I was happy they won if I couldn't win. I was absolutely delighted with the way the horse ran in the race.
We were a little unlucky to lose, and in hindsight, the fact that the inside of the track later on was then created a metre out because of the bias away from the inside. In hindsight, you know, perhaps if that had happened earlier in the piece with Moonee Valley, he'd have probably still won the race. But having said that, I think he had to give Octagonal, who nobody knew much about at that stage, except that he was a promising 3-year-old. He had to give Octagonal, I think, 9 kilos or 9.5 kilos, maybe 10. And then to see what Octagonal did subsequent to that, you know, puts the performance in some perspective then.
But Mahogany reverted to sprinting a year later and showed his great ability when he did this.
Now Mahogany hits the front. It's Mahogany with Poetic King coming after him at the 100. Mahogany by a length, Poetic King, the stablemates. It's Mahogany giving plenty. Poetic King coming at him hard. Mahogany wanted ahead, Poetic King.
It was a fast gallop, but the 6-year-old could go even faster.
Here he's in trouble there, Mahogany. At the 200-metre mark, Spartacus hits the front. Ken Grande's coming at him on the outside. Mahogany, without a lot of room, is trying to squeeze through. He's got through Mahogany. He pounced on the lead from Ken Grande and Spartacus, and Mahogany, despite difficulties, draws away to win a length and a half.
Mahogany resumed again in October 1997. This time in the 1,000-metre weight for age Churnside Stakes.
On the inside, and now Mahogany. Here comes Mahogany storming down the outside to grab Spartacus and then be discreet, but Mahogany sprints right away. What a great horse he is.
Of course he won. But remember, this is the same horse that 5 seasons earlier won 2 derbies. In the end, Mahogany just raced his way into immortality. A few racegoers will still have doubts. Probably because his ability to sprint, stay, and keep on keeping on season after season made him difficult to assess. Certainly there have been better stayers, and there have been better sprinters. But can you name the last Derby winner that could win Group 1 1,000-metre sprints 4 seasons later? And what champion sprinter could win 1 Derby, let alone 2? Mahogany had a bit of everything. And he showed it for 6 seasons. He had the lot. Rarely has such a great racehorse been remembered for his losses the way Viandacross is. That's why we must remind ourselves that the New Zealand champion that ran second in both the 1992 Caulfield and Melbourne Cups, both under controversial circumstances, was a winner.
Viandacross is angling for a run on the inside. He's trying to get a run through as Heroicity's coming with a good run on the outside, and then Rough Habit. They've got towards the 250-metre mark. Prince Salieri, Heroicity in front. Down the outside now is Rough Habit coming with a run, and then Viandacross. It's Rough Habit racing up now. Rough Habit has hit the front of the last 100 metres. Viandacross is dashing through. Viandacross has grabbed the lead, and Viandacross, fantastic win, beats Rough Habit.
A hugely popular horse both in Australia and New Zealand. Viandacross had just been narrowly beaten by Mannerism in exceptional circumstances after jockey Shane Dye went right to the outside rounding the home turn in the Caulfield Cup. Then he ran on late for a second to Sub-Zero in heavy conditions in the Melbourne Cup. Viandacross was an exceptional galloper, winning 2,000 guineas at Riccarton at just his 8th race start. Then, in his first test against the older gallopers, he again collected Group 1 glory.
His run. At the moment, it's Captain Cook in front, Solbert, Lador, Lady Rua, Raccoona, My Only Vice, Nelson, Valentine, and here comes Viander Cross. What a run. He's got to the front, Viander Cross from Captain Cook, running on My Only Vice, and he's Overwhelmed coming into it. It's all over. Viander Cross from Overwhelmed, and Viander Cross streets them. Second home Overwhelmed.
By the time Viander Cross came to Australia for the Sydney Autumn Carnival, he'd won 6 races from 11 starts, was photo finished out of the New Zealand Derby, and hadn't missed a place. After a first up fourth in the Gosford Guineas, the young star was ready to take on the heavyweights.
Extreme outside, coming to the 200 mark and wide out. It's Viander Cross getting to the lead over Naturalism. They've shaken off Big Dreams. Viander Cross has got the better of Naturalism close to home and is racing away and scores a top win in the Guineas. Viander Cross came away to win it a bit more than a length to Naturalism.
That race started a rivalry with Naturalism, but Lee Friedman's brilliant 3-year-old gained the verdict on points in the Rosehill Guineas and the AJC Derby to follow.
And here comes Viander Cross. Viander Cross down the outside is motoring home. Naturalism the leader. Viander Cross inch by inches wearing him down. Naturalism still in front. He ran out near the line, but Naturalism wins at a half length to Viander Cross in a bumping finish.
Viander Cross would square the ledger a year later at Group 1 weight for age level. In the meantime, trainer John Wheeler had a couple of rich handicaps in his sights, and it looked to be working perfectly come the start of the spring. Wins at group level over 1,600 metres at Wanganui and in the 2,000-metre Celt Capital Stakes at Hastings had topped the Crossways gelding off nicely. He went into the Caulfield Cup 5-2 favourite.
Side Viander Cross has come very wide after him, and they were followed by Mannerism coming home well, and then came Equidity. It's Viander Cross out wide, Gathano near the inside, and Mannerism in the centre. Clear of Equidity, Viander Cross the outside has taken the lead in the Cup now from Mannerism, and then Gathano and Equidity. Viander Cross in front of Mannerism. Viander Cross answering the urgings of Shane Dyer head in front. Mannerism coming at him. Viander Cross, maybe a nose to Mannerism.
Well, I wouldn't have taken off as soon in the Caulfield Cup. I went a bit soon, but going wide, I'd go that wide every day because the track was better out there. But I didn't know the horse, and I'd never ridden the horse, and he had a flat spot that day, and at the half mile he was off the bit, and I dug him up, and he got there far too soon, which caught me by surprise. The Melbourne Cup, well, you know, unfortunately it just rained that morning, and I didn't want rain because it was a 2-horse race, Sub-Zero and Viander Cross, and it poured with rain. I held him up a bit. He got out a little bit late, but the other horse was too good. You know, the last bit I wasn't making ground up on him. He'd ran a very credible second.
Sub-Zero might be the one. He's raced up to Sir Winston from Cavalieri Castletown, and then Viander Cross getting out late from Ali Boy. Greg Hall has raced to the front on Sub-Zero. He goes for home in the Cup, and he might have a run. He's 3 in front. Viander Cross, Castletown trying hard, but it's the Grays Cup. Sub-Zero holding Viander Cross at bay, and Sub-Zero wins the Melbourne Cup by 2 lengths. Second, Viander Cross, a length and a half away. Third,
Time for a
Castletown.
break. And what better place to rest those weary legs than in the hills near Wanganui. A brilliant 2-length win in the Group 1 Lion Brown sprint at Tarapa indicated that the champion had come back better than ever. He had come from the gruelling 3,200 metres of the Melbourne Cup to win against class 1,400-metre sprinters in a tick over 1 minute 22 seconds. Little wonder he was virtually unbackable in the Carline Cup and the Australian Cup 9 days later.
Durbridge in front of Fra, 2 lengths back now, Viander Cross. Dittman's asking him to go. He's starting to wind up now. They've got to the 200. Durbridge grabbed by Fra. Now Viander Cross coming. Prince Salieri just behind them. Fra's in front. Dittman goes for Viander Cross with the whip. He answers magnificently. The champion strides away, Viander Cross. Viander Cross for the Australian Cup, a length and a half.
Really, it was no contest. On to Sydney to settle a score with arch-rival Naturalism.
On his outside, and they're well clear of Native Neptune and Rough Habit as they turn the corner. Mahia immediately headed Dr. Grace. Viander Cross is now winding up. There's room between them for Naturalism. It's taking him a while to get going. The filly Mahia still in front. Viander Cross on the outside coming out of Naturalism on the fence, and Rough Habit is getting home well. Viander Cross goes for home. Viander Cross is drawing away from Mahia and Naturalism. Well done, Jimmy Walker.
Viander Cross was surprisingly beaten by fellow New Zealander Captive Edition in the rich BMW at Rose Hill 2 weeks later, and then lined up in a small but select Queen Elizabeth Stakes at Randwick.
Durbridge is still in front, coming to the 200. Inch by inch, Viander Cross and Rough Habit are getting to him, but Durbridge is clear with 100 to go. Viander Cross is the one to come after him. Durbridge shifted a bit. Viander Cross has nailed him now. Viander Cross grabs the lead in the shadows of the post. Go, Vandy. Viander Cross draws away to beat Durbridge.
It was the champion's 8th Group 1 victory, and sadly, his last win anywhere. He raced below his best the following spring and had suspensory trouble from that point on. Viander Cross was set for 2 further campaigns, 3 years apart. But the gelding just didn't show anything like the zest for racing that at one point was responsible for a record 15 wins and 11 placings from 27 starts. Perhaps life on owner Chris Turner's farm was just too good for a horse that had nothing left to prove.
I honestly believe Octagonal was tougher. He would keep going, he wouldn't stop. Let's face facts, you know, Octagonal won derbies. Viander Cross ran second in a derby. Maybe he should have won. Maybe he should have won a Caulfield Melbourne Cup. You know, but Octagonal did it and he won them. But he did win an Australian Cup. But then again, so did Octagonal win an Australian Cup. You know, they're both outstanding horses.
Scalacci's in front. Ruslan diving at him the last little bit. Ruslan went to Scalacci and beat him. Ruslan first, Scalacci second, I think.
It was Scalacci's farewell performance. And while the grey didn't win, his effort under 58 kilograms from barrier 15 in the rich Stradbroke handicap rates as one of his finest. It was also a study in what made Lee Friedman's sprinter such a crowd favourite. Not for his speed, but his sheer will to win and ability to grind the opposition into submission. Scalacci wasn't like a lot of other top horses. He didn't slowly creep up on greatness. He just grabbed it from the outset. His Lightning Stakes win came at just his 4th race start and his first in open company.
Under pressure, 250 out, and Scalacci raced up to Street Roughhead and took the lead, and then Noble Lancer. Final card can't go on and wrap around trying to get into it, followed by King Marauding, but Scalacci well clear. Wrap around finishing well with Umatilla on the outside, but the brilliant Scalacci wins it a length and a half.
We had a very big opinion of him right from the start, and he won his maiden at the Provincials, then ran unplaced under over 1,400 metres at the Spring Carnival here, which was probably too far to send him at that stage. And then we freshened him up, and a few weeks later he won 1,000 metres at Sandown, and he equalled the course record. And whilst you normally wouldn't run a horse like that in the Lightning off a restricted win, the fact that he equalled the course record at his 3rd start, it was probably going to be a pretty good gamble to run him in the Lightning. And of course the rest is history. He won that, and then the Oakley Plate, and then the Newmarket. So, and then the Galaxy on the trot. So, I mean, he's a magnificent sprinter.
Noble Lancer, the leader in the straight, with Scalacci coming out after it at the 200. Then Dark Bow and Mr. Cube, followed by All Archie. But Scalacci has taken the lead from Noble Lancer with 100 metres to go. The Flying Greys dash to the front of the whip. Dark Bow's finishing well. Scalacci in front of Dark Bow, and Scalacci wins it a half length. Dark Bow. Scalacci's coming after it quickly. Western Chorus has dropped out quickly though. Inside the 200, Scalacci got to Noble Lancer. Umatilla's running on okay, but the grey flash, Scalacci's put a gap in them. Umatilla's finishing quickly on the outside, and then Storaya, but Scalacci wins the magnificent treble.
Euclay's going strongly at the 200 mark. Scalacci is coming after him now. Dittman goes for the whipper. Scalacci ranges alongside. Old Friends Venture is rattling down the outside, but Scalacci shot clear close to home, and he's drawing away and is going to win well. Scalacci wins the Galaxy.
Scalacci's moved up to Roman Senator. He's got his nose in front. Scalacci, Blaylock's Bull trying hard on the outside. They're clear of Heavenly Knight. Scalacci's in front. He shot away from them. This is the big grey. Look at him go the last little bit. Scalacci's too good for them, unequal, flying home at the end, but Scalacci's won it.
The 3-year-old was beaten in the Stradbroke, but not disgraced. He started a hot favourite and received just 2 kilograms from the great Rough Habit. Time for a well-earned rest. Friedman gave the horse just 2 starts in the spring, the Moyer Stakes, and then a lacklustre 6th of 8 in the Linlithgow on Oaks Day.
Grey horse is going for the minion, and he's got it. He's racing away. Scalacci races away to win by nearly 2 lengths.
No, that was a conscious decision we took with the owners, that he'd had a very hectic autumn and winter and raced on in Brisbane and won group races up there. He just needed extra time, and of course it's pretty much still the case. There's not many decent sprint races at weight for age for sprinters during the spring. There's very, very few. And he was a horse that didn't like wet tracks, so there was no point in having him ready for the Manikato early in the piece. The Ian McEwen, which is a $100,000 race now, hadn't been created then. And really the only other option for him was the Moya, and you just hope by that stage of the spring that the tracks would dry out and he'd be effective, which he was.
Scalacci would appreciate the light campaign and come back to outstanding form in the autumn.
It's Clever Zoe in front at the 300, only about 2 lengths Uzuk. Spanish Mix, and then a length and a half to Scalacci, given full bore. Clever Zoe at the 200 in front of Uzuk. Spanish Mix, and then Scalacci. It's Clever Zoe in front, 100 out. Here comes Scalacci. He's hitting top gear now. Clever Zoe a neck, but Scalacci, the big grey flash, is going to win it. Scalacci from Clever Zoe.
Despite 2 earlier failed attempts at 1,400 metres, Friedman had no hesitation stepping his speedster up to that distance in the Futurity Stakes. His class got him through.
Scalacci at the 200, led by 3 lengths. Jolly Old Mac, Excited Angel, Hilda Strike, Mannerism out wide, but Scalacci in front, 100 out. He's got a big lead over Excited Angel, Mannerism, and it's Scalacci who'll win the Futurity. Scalacci all the way, a length and a quarter. Excited Angel, a big run second.
2 weeks later, he ran a sensational 1:9.4 to take out the Stanley Wootton at Moonee Valley before heading to Sydney to be tried as a miler. He didn't quite run the distance in the Doncaster, but he did this on the way.
200 Scalacci clear. Primacy's after him now. Primacy out of the pocket is coming after the grey flash. Scalacci still in front. Primacy can't get to him. Scalacci holding on, and he's run the 1,500 all right. Scalacci wins the Ryder.
The Ryder Stakes would be Scalacci's last win for almost 18 months. He had 1 run in the spring for a close second in the Moya, and was narrowly beaten in his attempt for a 3rd straight Lightning the following autumn. But the champ just wasn't racing with his usual zest. On resuming, however, he found his real form.
The lead, Scalacci, Bells of Ear coming home, but old Scalacci, what a great comeback.
Then lost it again, with ordinary performances in the Linlithgow and Sandown Stakes. His courageous efforts were starting to tell. Despite placings in the Australia and CF4 Stakes, both Group 1s, and behind horses the calibre of Hariba and Jeune, the Big Grey appeared to be struggling. But he still had left one of the best performances of his glittering career.
At the top of the straight now, Dittman goes for Mahogany. Scalacci sticks on very gamely. It's Mahogany about a neck in front. Scalacci's fighting back. Scalacci again with his head in front of Mahogany. Wider out, then Spanish Mix and Jeune. It's Scalacci in front of Mahogany. Jeune motoring, but Scalacci's won it again.
Scalacci had a pretty easy run in the lead that day, made it very hard for Mahogany to beat him, but they were the 2 dominant horses over that sort of trip at that time. Both of them raced well into old age, and both were, you know, outstanding horses that won a lot of money. Well, I hadn't had an outstanding sprinter up until he came along. Bint Maskey would have been, but you know, her racing career was curtailed through injury and the like, so she never really got to her full potential. But he was the best sprinter we've had. Probably he and Mahogany. It's hard to choose between them, but I think as a specialist sprinter, Scalacci would probably just have the edge. And they don't come along every year or two. You know, we're still looking for another Scalacci. It may be a long time before we get another one, but he was certainly dominant in those 3 or 4 years that he raced. And I've got the pleasure of seeing him every weekend when I go to the farm.
Australia's next brilliant sprinter will no doubt be compared with Scalacci.